Why is most organizing advice unhelpful for people struggling with clutter or with hoarding? And what can you do differently? In this video, I'm going to share an organizing process that took me years to build because I was lost for a long time on how to reach the seemingly unattainable goal of keeping a room clean and neatly arranged. First, I'm going to show how to quickly make a big difference in the amount of clutter, then how I brought the room to a final stage where it was comfortable and organized, how I recommend decorating for someone who struggles with clutter, and finally my tips for keeping a room this way. There are so many videos and articles trying to convince you that their clever solutions can solve all your problems, but we know it's not true, and if it was true, they wouldn't have stopped being a problem a long time ago, wouldn't it? Hoarding is when someone has an unhealthy relationship with material things, and it has many different causes, and it can look very different from person to person. So the goal, the strategy, and the process is going to look different from what a non-hoarder would do. I'm a recovering hoarder, and this is the space I'm working with, which is a normal room in my area. It's got windows, carpet, a door, and a closet. I should mention here some important points that will help you start on the right foot. When there's a lot of clutter, there usually is a lack of clear floor space and can really slow a person down when they're constantly stepping over and around things. Your first objective is to make a path to the center of the room, then clear out that central area to walk around in. Set up a surface to work on, ideally a table, but any piece of furniture could work as long as its size makes sense for the room. And you'll want to make sure that you have a chair nearby or that you're comfortable sitting on the floor for the really slow, tedious bits. Once you have that, I would recommend making sure you bring something to drink in a bottle since a cup can splash a lot more when it's knocked over, and that you have music ready. I dressed comfortably, just like this actually, and started when no one is home because it's hard to do something you feel a lot of shame about, especially when someone is around. So find a good time for you, and if you're ready, let's get started.
Kitty, get this here. There are the ribbons.
I started playing some music and immediately made a beeline for that table in the center of the room. Then I took off all the things that were piled up on top of there and put them on the side so I had a clean surface to work with. Taking a good look around earlier, I decided the category of things taking up the most space were clothes. So I pulled out all the clothes I could see in that room and put them in boxes, then put them to the side. If you're like me, you might have a system. Not necessarily a great system, but a system for dealing with a large collection, and that's great. The biggest concern here though was the everything else, and these clothes were only going to get in the way and slow down the process, so I had to move them out. I started going in a clockwise direction around the room, which I learned years ago from the how-to book, Sync Reflections by the Fly Lady. This is great for me because I'm not crisscrossing the room over and over, driven by impulse and confusion. Working left to right, top to bottom, helps me remember where I'm working in the room. Because, like with my ADHD, I often forget what I'm doing while I'm doing it.
No, it's true. I forget things almost instantly. It runs in my family.
I recommend making use of emptied space as you go. This helps me keep things organized. I move clutter off the shelf and immediately start using it to hold a certain category of things, like sewing. I'll add to the shelf as I continue around the room, then after my first sweep, I'll find a better place to put them all, like in a drawer or in a box, and then start using the shelf again. Dividing the room into zones doubles the impact of this method. Think about how you're going to use this room and what kind of activities you're doing here. Then think about which activities go together. For example, imagine that someone has their vintage video games and shoe collection in a room, but they also have bottles of water, wrapping paper, old curtains, and unopened packs of underwear from the store. It doesn't matter how you organize it, these things will never make sense together, so some things will have to move. You can put the games in one zone and the shoes in another zone, and then move other things to the rooms that you are always going to use them in. Once you have a zone for games and for shoes, then you can bring in all the games and nice shoes from the rest of the house. You're still living, and sometimes things will leave their zones, but when you're looking for it, there's at least a high chance you're going to find them there. To make this work even better, keep things that are used together in the same place, like mugs and coffee stuff on the same shelf, instead of opening 2 drawers and 2 cabinets to make coffee, and then put these zones where you already use those things. You kind of already know where zones should go. Look at where things pile up and think about how you or your family is using them, especially if you're always leaving the same things in the same, wrong place instead of where you think they should go. Maybe trust instead that your body is being efficient while your brain is overthinking it. Speaking of overthinking it, I found that cardboard boxes are my favorite organizing tool because they can be temporary or used for permanent storage. So you can just move a box if suddenly you decide this can go in the garage or a dark closet instead of getting caught up on how you're going to store this now. Not to mention they're easy to label, they come in standard sizes, and they can be recycled or composted when you're done with them. I like thinking of them as inboxes and outboxes. So for each cycle around the room, I can focus on searching for everything that falls into one specific category. And once I've gone through all the boxes looking for one category, I know that whatever's in this pile, this is it. I just need to put it away until I can organize it, and in the meantime, I can move on to the next category. It could feel like a waste of time, but for someone with a terrible memory like mine, it's so much better than trying to remember multiple things while doing a very stressful task. Plus, there's something so nice about finishing with a box and moving from one stack to the other stack when you're done with it. You may have noticed that I've been stacking boxes, and that's because stacking them opens up the space, and as the floor opens up, I won't have to step over or between stuff as I'm moving around. As I'm stacking them, I try to make sure heavier things are closer to the floor, and if they're open, then I'll stack it so that one box goes in one direction, and the next box is a little rotated so it sits on top of it at an angle and doesn't fall through. Stacking boxes like this, I think, lowers the risk of one of these towers falling over and just spilling all over the floor. I'm going around and around this table, which I'm using as a sort of staging ground, and putting things here to go through quickly in a comfortable way. When it's all laid out like that, figuring out what to do next and then doing it happens fast. Much faster than when they're all in boxes, but you also don't want to have too much out on the table. Then it all gets jumbled and messy, kind of defeating the purpose. I'm going to add that it's important to keep that center surface in a constant state of flux. I don't let the piles on it become invisible and lose purpose. Instead, I try to keep things moving, and if it starts feeling stagnant, then I take the space back. I'll move those things into an empty box and move that to the side, clearing my head in the meantime, and I'll suddenly feel refreshed and ready to move forward. I guess when in doubt, put it in a box and just get to it later.
This is my box. It's where I keep all my junk that I don't feel like dealing with.
Most stuff ends up on the table and will eventually go into drawers, and I love drawers so much. I can't stress enough how much I love them, so let me explain. All drawers do is hold piles when you really think about it, and no one knows if a drawer is disorganized until they open them. If they're neatly organized and have like dividers and stuff, then that's extra. But really, they're just containers, and stuff is rolling around in them, and they're super easy to open and like access. So yeah, you can take advantage of pre-existing piles or containers of stuff and put them in drawers so they're ready and nearby, but in a more socially acceptable way. I did my best with these drawers, but there were just too many things here. I put my favorite DVDs on the shelf for easy access and realized that rather than try to fit everything in the middle drawer, it was time to move those things into bins. With getting that space back, I could start on a different category of office supplies, and it came to include glues, tapes, and other adhesives. This took a little long though, so I'm gonna jump to the next day.
There you are, you sneak. Thank you.
Welcome.
A week or so later, I'm going into this with a little drawer unit that I got from Amazon. I spent days looking at options and tried finding one from a different source, but eventually I had to move on and learned yet again that it's better to focus on getting something done and not getting it done perfectly, or else you'll stall out and stop making any progress. I got as far as I felt like going and moved this all into a box, and there's some relief that comes with knowing all of the office supplies are in this box or on the desk, because then if I'm looking for something, it can only be in one of these two areas. I knew at this point that I wanted to work on the left-hand dresser, but to do that, I had to organize the sewing supplies that were taking up shelf space after several cycles around the room. Here, I had to take a break, which is not just nice, but you gotta do occasionally while organizing, as tempting as it is to keep going for as long as possible. Working alone means you have no witnesses and no judgment, no one rushing you, so give yourself permission to sit sometimes and do nothing. With my chronic fatigue, I have to very intentionally pace my activity and not push too much too early in the day, or I'll crash hard after a few hours. I decided this dresser was only for sewing stuff, and I'm reorganizing the drawers to better use this space and form subgroups in each drawer. Take as long as you need for this, and don't be afraid to change your mind. Nothing is final, and a drawer could serve several functions before something sticks. Which is a nice mantra for things in general as a way of being gentle with yourself. Near the end of the video, I'll talk about a crucial aspect of hoarding and decluttering, which is shopping habits. We tend to judge ourselves and others harshly for purchases made, and in my experience at least, beating myself up about owning something isn't as helpful as taking a hard look at how I got there. Observing, noticing patterns, and learning is what leads to growth and recovery, and I'll even show a low-stress way to do this later. In the meantime, I was working on these drawers for another hour or two when the camera died, and somehow everything fit nicely in the dresser, so I moved on to miscellaneous gardening and other hobby supplies. Realizing the things on the table had more in common with the things in that big box on the floor than I had first thought, I'm sorting them into the shelf here and creating subgroups on each shelf. I like to think of shelves as semi-permanent sorting stations because that's how they're often used. I sometimes prefer seeing things to remembering where they're tucked away, and there's nothing wrong with that. And like with most things, organizational systems are simple until you make it complicated, so I'm doing this fast instead of neat or aesthetic. Now I'm just putting things away, and although I don't know what I'll do yet with every single thing on the table, I can make decisions confidently, which is a huge change from before. She wanted scritches, and I'm not going to tell her no. With executive dysfunction, breaks are helpful in chopping up a tedious process so that while things are going slow or the changes are getting smaller and less noticeable, you don't feel like you're getting hit with setback after setback because then you'll get frustrated and settle for solutions that don't actually work. Instead, you can slow down and continue to stay motivated. I'm just putting things away here. It took me years to learn that organizing, and for that matter, decluttering, isn't a one-and-done job. It's an active process, and as long as you're living, things are going to move out of place, and you're always putting things away, always tidying. Most people grew up knowing this, but no one ever told me. I had this idea in my head for most of my life that the goal is to never have clutter, that people who have their lives together are happy because everything is always in its place. And really that's not the case, but it's presented this way in reality TV and in magazines because it's storytelling and you have to give the audience a satisfying conclusion, and I just didn't know that everyone else knew that's not how most people actually live. When you're in recovery from hoarding though, you have to work hard to decrease your tolerance for clutter because you're surrounded by so much stimuli that your body naturally and very reasonably filters it out. As your tolerance decreases, the more easy and instinctive it becomes to maintain a comfortable room. Clearing a surface or a room of clutter is an incredible rush that doesn't last long if you don't have the skills and tools to keep improving. It's a good healthy reset though to overcome the drag of seeing the same cluttered surface over and over again. The lesson to take away from organizing a surface or space is to notice where you can cut back when it comes to material things. Before you start thinking about getting rid of an item, decide under what conditions you'll allow something like it back into your life again. For me, that's when everything started to change, when I started putting boundaries on how I allowed things to enter my home.
So this is
well, obviously I can straighten things up a bit.
Don't get me wrong, I'm still growing in this area, and this is going to sound really funny to anyone watching who has a healthy relationship with inanimate things, because however I say it, for anyone who isn't a recovering hoarder, day one of organizing his room is going to look like it's where I started on this journey. In fact, I've struggled with hoarding all of my adult life, and the most significant changes came as I started to think about longevity. When I'm considering a purchase in-store or online now, I think about the life expectancy of the item, and I'm like, will this stay in good condition for the next 30 years or so? Thoughts like this help me, as I'll go into later. By the way, if you notice that my shirt changed colors, this is a whole new day, but I started in the afternoon, about the same time as when I left off, so that transition was barely noticeable. After some uncertainty, I opened a box to see if there's anything in it that I could put away, hoping it'd spark an idea of what to do next, but the dog wanted scritches, so it was a good time to take a break anyway. I pulled out 2 boxes that each held their own category of items, and in one drawer went supplies for cosplay, and then cosmetics went in the other drawer. I'm continuing to go in a clockwise direction, going through boxes now to decide what to do next. I'm only looking for one or a few categories of things at a time. Anything else I'm encountering is added to boxes still in circulation, so I can decide later what to do with them without starting a pile somewhere. In this case though, I was exhausted and my back was hurting. I'm wearing a corset/back brace to keep my shoulders more aligned with my hips, and it's not constricting since I prefer to wear it a little loose, and only when I'm pushing through pain and discomfort. By that I mean the necessary actions to get this work done, like lifting things and bending over. It just helps me.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
I took a day off and came back, and the things on the table were meant to be given away, so they went in a box. I was ready now to look at the big bulky category of things I had set aside at the beginning of this project. In my case, it's a bunch of clothes and fabric that I intended to use in future sewing projects. Almost everything else in the room was put away, or at least in an acceptable place, so the next biggest challenge was going to come from taking care of this finally. I'm pretty sure that I'm sorting them according to fabric type, woven versus knit, since they behave differently when they're being sewn. I'll get into why when I start sewing garments on this channel. What's nice is that I still felt like I was in control of what's happening, and as things fell into place, I was feeling more and more confident in my choices. They started popping up as just the obvious thing to do next. And the number of boxes was starting to not bother me anymore, because I could imagine how the room would look when it's done. But like, with the vividness of knowing that it's about to happen.
So I just need you to help me put the finishing touches and everything.
This newspaper's from November 1986.
Oh, the first rumblings of Iran-Contra. Don't throw that out.
So I'm putting sewing stuff away, and while I'm at it, improving what's going on in these drawers. Focusing on one box at a time helps keep me from feeling overwhelmed, and after I've gone through enough boxes, I start consolidating them so they're more compact and I can take empty ones out of the room. Consolidation is a key part of organizing a space, and it's something hoarders especially are good at, just not in a way that's productive. We're deeply uncomfortable with having empty space anywhere because it feels like we should be putting that space to work somehow. I'm not going to wax poetic about all this though, because lots of other people have said it better than I ever can. But what I want to emphasize is this. Not every space needs to be packed or has to be useful or decorated in some way. Blank spaces and surfaces are healthy to have around you, just like taking breaks is good for your head and good for your back. To start healing from this mindset of everything has to be holding something, you gotta step away and think of it from a different angle. For example, why are there knickknacks on the windowsill? Are you hoping someone will see them and learn something about you? You want them to not be missed. They are on the windowsill after all. But honestly, they're still drowned out by the clutter, and case in point, the thing on mine wasn't supposed to stay there, but I forgot about it until I started editing this video. We'll get to what to do later, so please humor me for a second, and consider if the windowsill in your room might actually help you more as a clean surface. More sunlight will bounce into the room, dust and dirt can be wiped away with one quick motion, and items can't be knocked off accidentally. You've just made this area easier to enjoy, so maybe that's what that surface can do for you instead. This goes for anywhere you might be tempted to put trinkets, like corners of the kitchen counter or in little nooks and crannies. This wasn't an easy thing for me to learn, and I'm always catching myself too and asking myself this, and I'm getting better.
Well, I don't really think there's anything I can part with at the moment.
It's a new day, and I'm starting with a clean table, which is nice. The boxes of fabric are under the window, and I'm stacking boxes with clothes in front of the closet, putting things away, and starting a basket for hats and accessories. The dog, of course, wanted some scritches, and how can I say no to that face? I took out things that I'll use in other rooms, and moved some decorative items so they're above my line of sight for now. Set up a few empty boxes to help me sort things quickly, then moved stuff on the table for easy access, and in the moment decided to clean off this dresser top to bring in more sunlight. I realized that I'd make more progress if I put a shelf next to the desk, so I can go into the next sorting phase with room to put things, just in case. I'm putting bias and tailor tapes, like large flat things, in a vertical rack and storing that in a drawer. Then I'm going counterclockwise around the table, looking for toiletries, and anything else goes back in these boxes. It's pretty satisfying to reach a tipping point where more things just need to be put away. In the name of achievable goals, I'm not organizing the desk yet. I'm content enough knowing that it's there, and in my head, it's a project saved for another day. It's better for me to avoid distraction while I'm in a flow state, and diverting time and attention to a side quest will tire me out in a way that wouldn't feel good. If you're familiar with video games, a way that I recommend for planning tasks and preventing yourself from becoming overwhelmed is to think of them as side quests. Small things are no less important, but they contribute less meaningfully to the main objective, so you can group them together and put them to the side. Having them all in one place is still helpful to your mission, even if you can't get to it yet, and it'll be there when you've reached a point to the main objective where you can mentally afford to get sidetracked for a bit. The main objective for me here is to get through more of these boxes of unorganized things. Now that I'm at a stage where I'm putting most things away, I pull out a box and look for a category to jump out at me, go through it, move it to the chair's other side, and occasionally add to the big box of doom when I have no idea what to do with something. I used to call it my big box of shame, but I've tried to go past those feelings of shame. The big box is essentially for things to get to later, so I'm not slowing down, and sometimes the box follows me to other rooms. I guess it's like a floating junk drawer. When I finished collecting all the toiletries, that box went to a bathroom, and I set up a line of empty boxes for easy sorting, which turns out I didn't need yet.
Several days later.
I wanted to go into this day feeling more sure of what to do, so I made a 3-page list in my downtime of as many things as I could think of and started crossing them off. I don't like making lists when the path ahead is certain and things happen in a specific order, because seeing a long list and how far I have to go starts to freak me out. But when there are many different directions where I could go and things can happen in any order, I like having a list to remember all the little things I want to do. In this case, it was 3 pages, front and back, and for some reason that felt good to me. I think because my memory is awful, and with this list, I would know what to do until it runs out. I get the best use out of closet space with these vertical organizers, and I think I'll make more with fabric and clear vinyl packaging one day. Closets are great, and it seems like housing under a certain price gets rid of closets, while more expensive housing gets bigger closets every year. At some point they'll have to stop, because some of them are too big for a person to take care of all their things, and it's too easy to just throw things away when they're in bad shape. I plan to make a video soon showing how to mend clothes, so if you're interested, please subscribe and set the bell notifications to all so you don't miss it. It's a satisfying skill to learn and helped me pay attention more to what I was buying. If it's not worth my time to mend, tailor, or turn into something new, then it probably wasn't worth buying something that's been to more countries than I have and crossed thousands of miles to get to this shopping rack. So either I can mend it and promise myself that I'll do better, or it's not worth mending and goes in the garbage. Now, where was I? I was talking about closets. I think here I'm taking out things from the closet that don't belong, then taking out shirts to fold and put away, and finding dresses and things to put on hangers. I started throwing some clothes into other categories, like a box for fabric, one for tights and leggings, and I think there's a box for fuzzy knits. I brought in some drawers that were sitting in another room, and instead of stacking sweaters and jeans on a shelf, I'm folding them in thirds and filing them vertically in drawers to save space. So thank you, Marie Kondo. I find, though, that hanging most of my clothes is easier to maintain than a system where I'm folding most clothes and putting them in drawers. For me personally, at least, it's easier to put away clean laundry when most tops are going on hangers and most socks are thrown into the sock drawer unfolded. Sure, it sounds chaotic, but the clean laundry pile becomes that much less daunting.
Just a second.
Picking up where I left off the day before, I went ahead and finished filling these drawers and putting them in the closet, and sat down to sort through a bag of stuffed animals that belonged to my partner's grandmother. Some of these I immediately made a connection with and knew I wanted to keep in this room. Also in the bag were spare bed sheets and other things that'll be good for sewing projects later. Here I skipped several hours where I was looking for small items to put away and figure out what to sort out next. I was low on energy and starting to look in the big box and writing down more things to do. It's good for pacing myself to avoid running out of energy entirely, and helps with anxiety because I know that I will remember what to do later. The dogs are trying to convince me here to go outside, I think. I don't need these empty boxes, so they're leaving, as well as a box of things to give away. I'm taking these to the other room and coming back right away to avoid getting distracted. I was in denial but could feel that I was losing steam, so I'm grouping together empty baskets for use later, then tidied this corner and finally called it quits so I'd have energy left to eat dinner.
The next morning.
I'm starting with less boxes today and less clutter in general, so I'm following the list and putting things away, checking each box to see if I've missed anything before moving it to the floor. Continuing the clockwise directional pattern, when I complete a cycle, I go back to the corner I started in and start again with a new goal. Whenever I need it, I reach for a small basket, box, or bag to keep things together before stowing it in a drawer, because I don't like seeing loose things sitting in there, even when they're arranged nicely. Open shallow boxes and compostable plastic bags are among my favorite organizational tools because I can be more carefree about how things look rather than obsess over how they're arranged, which induces in me negative feelings and needless stress. Most clutter is made of small items, and I get easily distracted, so my thoughts run away from me the first chance they get. Putting away small things is my way of minimizing distractions, and when small things are put away and organized, they take up less space. This is why I put away even nice-looking small trinkets, because they can sit in a drawer for me to appreciate them when I have time to, but I can think about other things the rest of the time. I imagined a different purpose for these items, that's why I got them, and had to unlearn this pattern of acquisition, which is the only way to exit the endless cycle of hoarding. You can secretly wish someone would take it all away, or fantasize about the new life you could start if something beyond your power took everything away from you, but you have to be honest with yourself here. Hoarding is a survival skill and a behavior that will bring clutter back and fill the space again. Historically, this was a useful skill to have, and you could have been the neighbor that always has the things someone needs. But in the age of online shopping and hundreds or thousands of products being sold to solve the same problem, that's no longer the case. Your neighbors and family members already have the same things in their home, and if they don't, they will order it from Amazon and get same-day shipping, or drive to Target to get everything else they need for that week. By the time you've asked if they'd like to take it home, they're good. They needed something, they got exactly what they needed and already took care of the problem. And because they're not hoarding, they won't be interested in keeping extras in their house unless they were already ready for the extra responsibility. Every time you invite something into your home, you're making a promise to yourself that you will get use out of this and or keep it in good condition. I'm gonna knock this out as comfortably as possible. So I'm sitting down and gathering boxes around me to sort through, separating fabrics like natural woven fabrics from natural and synthetic knits, denim, fatigues, and pillowcases. It's finally time for me to store all this fabric that are specifically for several sewing projects I have planned for this winter. This corner is the fabric zone, and I wanted to only have drawers under this window. With this corner knocked out and this side of the room only for sewing material, it's less for me to remember and less stuff to comb through when I'm organizing other areas in the house. The room doesn't visually change much, so I'm going to skip ahead a bit.
Yep, she's cleaning.
It must be really bad.
I also took a short break and came back. These fabrics, sheets, and pillowcases were ready to go into these bins, so I started folding and grouping them together so they're easy to find later. I'm super excited about what I'm going to sew this winter, and can't wait to share those projects online because I've been inspired by quilting competitions and the quilts I found in this house. In that clear drawer under the window is a quilted mattress cover that'll be great for a cold weather house robe, and I might even do some applique with the quilted scraps. Even this far into the process, and with this much momentum, it's still important to find time to slow down, to process what's happening and feel the progress being made, and make moves that you're confident in, which comes with practice. The more nervous you get and the more frazzled, the quicker you're going to burn out, and the more work you might have to undo later. And sitting down for sorting small things when there's a lot of them is a good idea, in a chair close to where they're going to be stored if possible, so you can focus on just this area. I wanted to finish these drawers so I'd have a fully organized dresser and had all these small boxes and trays within reach to help with that. Once I'm done at that though, they went back into a box because I needed this table surface for the next part. I'm bringing in things from other rooms that should go here, and now that all the organizing is done and I know where everything should go, the room is finally organized. The hardest part is over essentially. All I have to do is put things where they should go. I know where everything is in the room, which was my goal, and for someone who struggles with hoarding, this is the dream. I'm proud of how far this room's come and also how good it's about to get. I'm eager to finish and decorate this space in a way that feels good, but to reach this point, I had to unlearn certain ideas that haunted me for many years. I always wanted to be that person with a cool and funky home that has loads of personality and spent way too much in trying to live like a quirky sitcom character. What I learned is you do yourself a disservice by trying to express all these things about yourself in a space, when the amount of it is hurting and frustrating you in other ways. Hoarding is a very lonely experience, and I ended up craving the kind of connection that was missing because of the clutter around me. It took time to realize that I wanted the chance to share my space with people, but trying to show everything at once was inflicting psychic damage, and I was better off with caring less about that and more about making a space healthier for me first. It feels nicer when things are put away, and I don't do it often enough, but after the move, I was trying to improve in that area everywhere else in the house. This room suffered the brunt of it as a storage space, and with time that'll change, because this room is about to become more active, and I'll have to look inward more to maintain it. Most things I had brought in and put away now, and the last of it is on this table. I went ahead and sat down because standing and thinking was getting more overwhelming. I'm so close, and don't want to risk burning out at this point. I would recommend sitting down whenever you're going to tidy too, since it'll limit your focus to everything that's within reach, and it'll become a daily habit. Whenever you don't know what you're going to do next, tidying never hurts. And this table will continue to serve as a staging area for organizing, as well as a staging area for projects, and I'm going to try to keep it clear of clutter otherwise, so it's a nice, visually open space for eyes to rest on, especially because there's already a lot going on in this room. In the next hour, I moved some decor to the table, but that was a mistake, so I'm skipping here to the next day.
Cleaning crud up in the kitchen as we sing along.
I had stacked on the table all of the things I wanted to hang on the walls, and sorted them by size off to the side so I'd have a surface to work on. I'm using brown butcher paper and a pencil to trace around each picture that I want to hang up, and I'll cut out and hang the tracings on the walls of tape so I can decide where they'll all go before making any holes. Behind me is a pizza blanket towel thing that I found during all the organizing, and I'd love to know if my partner's grandma got this for herself, and wish I could ask her how she was going to use it. Despite wearing the steel corset for back support, my back started to hurt like hell from leaning over the table. I had to finish tracing these pictures though because I had the camera on and was determined to get this part done. Then it was time to clean up and bring everything back to center. I'd experimented a little with picture placement on the computer and tried two ways. The first way I tried was drawing each wall on paper at 1/4-inch scale and using cutout shapes to play with the picture's placement. And then I took photos of each picture, cropped them, and dropped them into the drawing instead. I ended up liking the digital file better because I could see the pictures and how they played off of one another color-wise. When I was happy with where everything was, I started hanging up the pictures one by one, sometimes leaving pieces of tape at the bottom corners so I'd get their placement exactly. Just have this light left, and I was getting giddy about how it's all looking. I'm going for a maximalist aesthetic, which is a godsend for hoarders, or people recovering from hoarding. It's clutter according to others, but it's organized clutter, and it actually brings joy. So more of that, please. A few more things are being displayed, and I might change my mind in the future, but this room is just about done. And instead of worrying about keeping it nice, I accept that this room will go through cycles of order and disorder as I learn more and become better at maintaining it.
It's so vivid.
You made it! As promised earlier, I'm going to talk about something that made the biggest impact on where I am today, which is changing how I shop for things. This actually started when I was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2008. When I had to eliminate gluten from what I ate, then grocery shopping became an entirely different experience.
I sometimes have a feeling I can do crystal meth, but then I think, better not.
Because product packaging, placement, sales, and store gimmicks had absolutely no impact on what I could eat. And picking out food became less stressful when I could ignore entire shelves of products. It took a long time for this change to trickle into other areas, but eventually I realized that the same idea applied to clothes and technology and finally everything else. As it turns out, the more mental gates I put between myself and the objects in my cart, the happier I was with what I ended up bringing home because some of those objects could go back on the shelves. If it's disposable and it's made of material that will outlive me by 1,000 years, but it'll look shitty after a short amount of time, I decided to take that personally. These companies are trying to sell me something that's shockingly permanent and toxic for the environment. but that'll start looking like garbage or break after a few uses. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but most of the time, it's super easy to just put it back on the shelf or kick it out of the online cart. If you're suffering from hoarding and want to get out, I have this recommendation, and I'll expand on this in a future video. Practice building the mental gates at home with what you have, and I suggest doing this with clothes first, regardless of whether you have too many or not. Like me, you don't have to stick to one aesthetic or vibe or experience, but look at your most favorite clothes and figure out what things you love most about each item. Then do it with all of your favorite things and pay attention to what features they have in common. If you want more of what you love and less of what you don't love, you can train your eye to see these things first, and you'll be less vulnerable to companies that are trying to convince you otherwise. Now, to be clear, I don't mean by this to say go forth and shop. Acquiring anything at this stage is not a good idea, and you want to learn as much as possible about yourself before adding anything else to the mix and muddying the picture.
I am sick of my Reebok sweats. I need some Puma sweats. I gotta buy a 6-pack of Zima. Dude, you don't drink. I think I should start.
The things and hobbies you truly love and who you actually want to be will be discovered through organizing and decluttering, not through shopping. Because as fun and stimulating as that is, it's hard to separate right now what you want deep down from what marketers want you to want, using every trick and ploy at their disposal. And the evidence, by the way, is your stash. Decluttering will come later because I believe personally that for recovering hoarders, it should be an entirely separate process, and rather than tackled simultaneously like in most decluttering videos. And even if I'm wrong, it's not hurting me to separate the two, so I don't think it'll hurt anyone else. So for now, the best thing you can do for yourself is to organize what you have without worrying about that just yet. Just try to arrange spaces so they work better for you than they did before. Any improvement is a win in my book. If that sounds exciting and you'd like to see more, please subscribe and accept all notifications for this channel. I'll be doing more videos and they'll be going up every 1 to 2 months, so YouTube might just never tell you if you watch a lot of videos. I'll post updates every week though, on what I'm working on, or what I'm learning on Instagram, if you're interested in that and in supporting this effort. Thank you so much for watching this all the way to the end. Good luck with your organizing, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye! By the time you've asked if they'd like to take anything home, they're good. They needed something. They got exactly what they needed. Acquiring any... Ooh. When I had to as it turns out, the more mental gates I put up with what I ended up bringing home, because some of those objects could go back on the shelves. Through decluttering will come later, because I believe personally that for recovering hoarders it should...
What the hell did you people do in there?
Something you and your puppies could only dream of, you non-miraculous son of a bitch.
Not miraculous.